Maybe it's one word, Oceanside. It's right.
Yeah, it's one word. And so when you say suffering, what's the suffering that you're talking about?
I'd say more mental.
Mental suffering. Okay. So for more mental suffering, maybe we'd want to go the A8 from A8's in.
From the moon?
It's with Jupiter and Mercury. It's a very good A8 actually. With Jupiter and Mercury, it's showing lots of resources given that aren't worked for and
Maybe it's from the moon. I
mhm.
don't see that. That's
Yeah.
why I was wondering.
Yeah. No. This
What
is
about,
this is a very protected A8 Mrityupada.
but you said that for the Mrityupada, would you have to look at Saturn also because it's the Karaka, the house Karaka, so if there's afflictions there, like it's retrograde and.
It's retrograde in the third house. It's a good house for Saturn to be in.
Aspecting the fifth.
It's
It's aspecting the moon.
Where it's aspecting is not going to give a problem to it. It's something that might be aspecting it, its placement, its sign that's going to cause a problem.
That's how they set Tiga last time. She could have two A8s. Could she not read them?
Ooh, beautiful knitting. So where's the second A8?
It's Scorpio. How do you?
With a Saturn aspect. Okay.
So there's two A8s.
For you,
Okay.
because your sign is ruled by, your eighth house is Aquarius, so it has two lords, Saturn and Rahu. So you have the luck in life to have two A8s.
Don't you have to choose one stronger?
There's a lot of philosophy on that, whether you use one that's stronger, whether you use both, whether you use, with the A8 it's going to depend, because for different calculations you're doing different strength calculations. For this particular technique that we're doing right now, the calculation would be which Mrityupada is more malefic, which one is weaker. That's the one you want to use. If you're looking at the Upapada or the A9 or a beneficial Aruda Lagna, then a beneficial Bhavapada, then you would use the strongest, most benefic. But in a case of Mrityupada, we use the most evil is the strongest. So in this case, which one is the strongest? The weakest, which is the one aspected by Saturn.
Yeah, but the other one's aspected by Rahu and Ketu.
How's Rahu by Rashi Drishti? Ketu. But the thing is, with Jupiter and Mercury there, that's protection. So
So you use the weakest one?
We're talking about mental issues, right? So with this chart.
it will show a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm saying what's wrong with the simple analysis that says look at that moon, it's in his enemy's house, it's aspected by Saturn and yeah, if you can
Because the main focus is on the A8, not necessarily the
I
moon.
understand, but
It's right here. You can see that the A8 falling in Scorpio, she's going to have some problems with debts. She's going to have some problems with children. She's going to have some problems with some investments that she made. It's going to give us just a little bit more information in the.
Are you going to consider the Rashi Drishti of Rahu and Ketu onto the A8?
Yeah, you would. But the thing is, with Jupiter and Mercury, they're by strength rules, the fact that Jupiter and Mercury are there and aspecting cancel that out.
They're still strong.
They very
protect her
strong.
from those
It's
two,
protecting
the
that
shock-
second
the
A8.
shock and the terror.
Yeah, definitely. And that the Scorpio A8 is definitely the weaker one. And is that right? The places that you've had your suffering. Yeah. So there she confirmed. Do we want to do one more chart? Well, suffering. Do you want to see your A8? See how strong it is since you haven't had suffering. Okay. This is Ajit's chart, and he's born 11/13/1945 at 1:26 in Pune, India.
1:26 a.m. p.m.
1:26. It looks like it's 24 in Pune. Somebody that says they don't suffer that much. It's a good state of consciousness to be in.
What was it, November what?
It's just the chart.
November what?
November 13th.
It's a.
Sagittarius.
Oh, okay.
49.
So the AA is ruled by Jupiter and aspected by Jupiter. It's protected.
Wow.
That's right there. The 8th house. It's in the. It's a Leo Lugna, Sagittarius ruling the 5th house. The AA is placed in the 5th house. It is aspected by Jupiter, protected. So it's lorded by Jupiter and aspected by Jupiter. So, and.
When we say Saturn is afflicted because it's in the 12th, then
It's definitely afflicted, but the A8's protected, so there's not going to be more problems coming from that area. There's an affliction happening, but he has the proper protection. It's where how bad it can make him suffer is going to be lessened.
Yeah.
For example,
That Ketu with the AA,
That-
according to your theory,
that's not going to be too bad, especially be in a Jupiter sign aspected by Jupiter. It'll be behaving quite well. Yeah, it'll be actually giving a lot of spirituality. That Ketu with the AA, so a lot of spiritual understanding, like beyond words, like stuff that they can't put into words. Okay, so everybody got how we're going to do that calculation? Very simple general calculation, but we're looking at and these rules that I'm using about how bad it is. They're the Jaimini rules, given and listed in Jaimini Upadesha Sutras. Standard rules. But when we look at which, for example, there's 2 Mrityupadas, we look at which one is the more evil to take, because we're looking at suffering. Now, if we were looking at her spirituality, we would definitely probably take the more beneficial Mrityupada.
Isn't there a rule that says, though, when the ruler like Rahu is in Aquarius in her chart, that you have to eliminate that?
That's a depending rule. Because we're using, the thing is, the difference in purpose that we use the Bhavapada for, it's going to change the calculation rules. And so, just because of that, there's still 2 Arudas. And so we have to pick according to our intent of information. Still would use the Rahu, or even if it's in that house, yeah. Okay. And so we talked about, and you saw with her chart how I exactly said where the areas that she felt most of her suffering, just by looking at that house. Where do I have it here? I saw once in a chart of a woman who was verbally abused by her mother. Her mother used to tell her she wasn't beautiful and used to beat her. She had AA in the 4th house. Let's see. There's this one woman's chart. She had AA in the 6th house, and with Marnakarkasthana Venus. She married her guru so that he could get a visa to come to England, and then he imposed celibacy on her, and she's stuck in the marriage. It's quite a suffering situation with that Marnakarka Venus. So we can take the whole situation of the house position, the planets with it, and we can let them tell us the story of where that suffering is. Very simple, right? Arudapadas in some ways are very simple. We're going to get into, when we start calculating death, it'll be a little bit more difficult, but a very simple way to just look right at it. Okay, so the 2nd and 8th houses, they're called They're the Rudra axis. Guruji kind of started going into it a little bit this morning, the Rudra axis, where he was talking about, what was the yoga where planets in the 2nd and 8th were causing poverty? It was a form of Kimadruma yoga. So the thing is, the 2nd and 8th house, they're fixed signs. And so they're storage houses. The one is storing our physical sustenance, which is our money, our bank account, those kind of things. The other is storing our ayu, our pranas, our life force energy. So they're both storage houses. And that's why malefics in that Rudra axis are hurting that storage capacity. If the 8th is getting hurt, the person is going to have health problems, and they're going to be spending bills on doctors, and there's going to be problems. If it's the 2nd house, they're going to not have money, and then they'll be getting sick because they're not living properly. When we work with Arudapadas, everything is working in axis. Everything is an axis, and we start looking at everything as an axis. When we're not using Arudas, the houses are a little bit more individualized, but when we start getting into the realm of the Arudapadas, everything is going to be working in an axis. Because if we look at the calculation of Arudas, half the houses can't contain an Arudapada. Everybody's aware of that? When you calculate, because of the calculations of it not being able to be in the 1st, because it can't be in the 1st and the 7th, it also can't be in the 2nd and the 12th and the 6th and the 8th just by mathematical factors. So half the houses are automatically an Arudapada can't be in.
Wait,